Hello everyone, welcome to episode number 25 of the Bill Podcast, and today we'll be going through VirtualBox, which is a program, a virtualizer that supports many operating systems. So this means that if currently your machine is a Mac and you're running a Mac OS X operating system, guess what? You can run, let's say, Windows or some Linux distributions right on this machine without having to get another machine or hardware or software. All right, so let's get started with that. We will firstly look at the VirtualBox website, and this basically tells us that VirtualBox runs on Windows, Linux, Macintosh, Solaris, and so many more. It is also, guess what, freely available as open source software. So it's freely available and we can just download and use it right away. I also highly recommend us to look through the documentation, and I would like to point out to one of the documentation that basically describes what a virtualization is. This basically allows an unmodified operating system with all of its installed software to run in a special environment on top of your existing operating system. So as we said, we can run other OSs in parallel to our Mac operating system. Right, in conjunction to the concept of virtualization, I thought of looking through the Wikipedia page, which also very interestingly shows us that, hey, we can even virtualize hardware, desktop, software, memory, storage, data, and network. Wow. So it doesn't just stop at operating systems. I would love to get into this more one day. This is very different and very interesting technology. Now let's take a look at what an operating system is. Recently, I was going through computer architecture, one of the courses in Coursera, and I would like to attribute this to David Wunschloff, one of the professors at Princeton who conducted this, and he basically gave this slide in one of his lecture notes, and that kind of blew my mind in a way that it connected physics to ultimately the application layer. So basically, as web developers or programmers, we are always working with programming language, let's say Python, JavaScript, Ruby, and then we kind of build our algorithm on top of it. And then, of course, lastly is our application, whether it's a desktop application or a web application or a mobile application. That's what we build. Now, in today's episode, we'll be going slightly one layer below in the abstraction, and that is the operating system and virtual machines. Fantastic, isn't it? This kind of reminds me of Arthur C. Clarke's three laws. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And guess where the magic is done? It's done in all these layers. All right, so that's a little bit about what virtualization and an operating system is. I also wanted to give a little bit overview about the history of operating systems so that we are kind of aware of all the engineers and programmers and scientists who have worked before us to create this very rich history, and we are basically benefiting from all of this. So as you can see, in 1980s there was the Windows, there was GNU, Sun, and there's 1990s Linux and Apple Windows. And there you go, some of the Linux distributions. But to say that operating systems in our world today, Windows, Mac, and Linux, and of course some of the mobile operating systems are well heard of because many of us are using them. But seriously, as of operating systems, there are tons of them. And this Wikipedia list kind of explains what are they. As you can see here under Apple, we even have like a Macintosh operating system, iOS, and even the iPod. All right, so I highly recommend you to check out this fun bit of history as well. Right, and this also comes from Wikipedia, one of the graphics that explains the history of Unix. So there you have it. Unix was the granddaddy that was created in the 1960s. And from there, we see various descendants, variants. We have the BSD, Berkeley Standard Distribution, and then you have Minix, and then you have Linux, next step. You have the Mac OS operating system, and on the other side you have the Sun, and you also have the HP and the Solaris and so on and so forth. So I highly also recommend you to check out this fun bit of flowchart that kind of connects us to the history of operating systems. All right, and finally, this bit of chart that I found also connects the Linux and CTSS. Wow, this is really old, to how the Windows operating system came about. So it's really interesting. So my point is, why would you want to run various operating systems in parallel to a current one? Well, basically for me, it's also the love of technology. I would want to know more about operating systems. But if you are do not want to get into that, that's fine as well. Sometimes what we want to do is test our web applications in different browsers. For example, Internet Explorer, which of course needs Windows operating system. So I often run a virtual machine with Windows to test my Internet Explorer and the web applications in it. And then what I do is I will also use Dropbox, or also I can use it from my deployment websites, and then I will kind of test my web applications through it. All right, so I am on this page. So what we will do is we will download the VirtualBox. The installation is successful. So let me just close all of this, and now I will launch VirtualBox. And there we go. Welcome to VirtualBox. So it's as simple as that. Now you see there are nothing going on here because we will now have to install the operating systems. So what are we going to install? The very first operating system we're going to install is Windows. Now this is definitely a paid operating system, so you cannot just download the ISO file which is needed to install the operating system. And I already kind of paid for it, and I got myself one windows.iso, so we'll be using that. The second operating system, in fact, we're going to do two distributions of Linux. So Linux is also another very good operating system, famous among hackers and a lot of programmers. And within Linux, there are actually a lot of distributions. So what we will be installing is one distribution of Ubuntu, which has a very clean and neat UI. That's what it's known for. Very stable as well. And the other one that we're going to install is Arch Linux. Now, Arch Linux is for experienced programmers and software developers. So if you want to play with what a Linux is and want to really configure it, then you can install Arch. Now, for the home page of Ubuntu, it is really very nice. So we will all go to the download section, and we will of course choose the 61-bit, and then we will download Get Ubuntu. I've already done that, and I already got the ISO file in my desktop. All right. And thirdly, for Arch Linux, it was really difficult because for first time person using Arch Linux, you had to really configure a lot. Now, one of my friends also suggested using it with the UI, which is Cinnamon. And that's why there is Arch Linux and Cinnamon that comes together with a very easy install of Synarch. So what we are going to do is we are going to download the Synarch ISO, and we're going to install it as well. All right. So basically, in summary, we're going to do three things. We're going to install Windows 8. First one. Second one, we are going to get Ubuntu, which is a Linux distribution. And thirdly, we are going to also do another Linux distribution, which is Arch plus Cinnamon UI. All right, so these are three things that we're going to get started inside VirtualBox. All right, so the very first thing we will do is get started with the Windows one. So as you can see, name and operating system, very clear, isn't it? So obviously it's Microsoft Windows, and this time it is Windows 8 for us. Let's give it a name. So I'm just going to call it as Win 8 and then continue. All right, so how much RAM do you want? All right, recommended size. I think this is pretty cool because I'm not going to go do a lot of heavy computing inside my Windows 8. Just going to run some Dropbox files or some simple IE browser. All right, so continue. All right, this should be all kind of by default. All right, there you have it. So they have created it for you. So now all we will do is go ahead and click the start button. After you click the start button, obviously we do not have a Windows 8 yet. So we have to first locate where is our ISO file. So for that, I will go to my desktop and click my Windows 8 ISO file. And the Windows installation is starting. So after we have put in the product key, it will finally start installing the Windows, and we will resume after it has finished. Finally, after installation, it will come to the startup screen. So let's go ahead and personalize it a little bit. And there you go, the Windows 8 is up and running. So let's just check out, let's see, this is the Metro UI. And let's just go to the desktop. Firstly, before we do anything, what we'll do is we'll install some guest editions. So to do that, we'll go to Devices in VirtualBox, and there you go, install guest editions. So what are guest editions? It is basically designed to be installed inside a virtual machine, and it's for the betterment, for the optimization of the guest operating system for better performance and usability. After this, we will go to the Windows Explorer. So right at the bottom, we will click that. We will go inside Computer. And over here, you will see Devices with removable storage. So let's go ahead and install the guest editions. So that's the setup. We'll just do Next, Next. So basically, after we install the guest editions, we will reboot Windows 8 for a lot of usability and performance enhancement. And I have logged in after the installation of guest editions, and soon we will see there's an option right at the top here, which is Views, and then I've kind of made it to the scale mode so that it covers the entire screen. So I quite like it. So why don't we go ahead and turn on the Internet Explorer and just search for VirtualBox. One thing that I like to do with the Internet Explorer is go to the settings and then go to the developer tools. And this kind of gives me an option to visit the different older versions of Internet Explorer. For example, over here, down here, if I can go to IE7, IE8, and that's how we can kind of test our web applications in different browser settings. Right, so that's it about Windows 8, and as usual, we'll just go ahead and shut down. This time, we will also click New and just give it a name Ubuntu, Continue, basically the same configurations as Win 8. And after this, we can click Start, and let's just choose the host drive. In the desktop, there you go, Ubuntu. Install Ubuntu and continue, and we'll basically go through some basic setup for Ubuntu. After the restart, here we see the Ubuntu interface once again. Now, just like what we did to the Windows 8 installation, we will install guest editions. So the graphic libraries and desktop services are done. What we will do is we'll restart Ubuntu. We have now restarted the Ubuntu, and this time we can go inside System Settings, Display, and here you will find a number of options in resolution. So we'll just choose the current one that's there, View, and then switch to full screen. There you go. So that is Ubuntu in full screen. This basically looks as if you're running Ubuntu in the host operating system. Finally, I will shut it down just like any other operating system. We have installed Windows 8 and Ubuntu, and finally the very last one will be Arch Linux. My friend suggested to use Synarch, which is basically Arch, the Linux distribution, and Cinnamon, the user interface. So we are going to go here and download Synarch and then install Arch and Cinnamon both together. Come back to my VirtualBox, and this time also I'll create a new one and call it Arch. And it automatically detects that it's Linux and version is Arch Linux. So let's just continue. So this time I will also start it up, and let me just choose the ISO file. So I'll just go to my desktop and choose the Synarch file. Just like Ubuntu and Windows 8, we will install it right away. As you can see, Arch is really lightweight, and yet highly configurable. So it's really fast in installation as well. Welcome to Synarch. So we can just do a command line interface installation. And there you go. Synarch is all there and running. And there you go. Synarch is installed along with Arch and Cinnamon. Notice after I have restarted Arch, after downloading the guest editions, it is now full screen. So after this, as usual, we can just go ahead and shut it down. We have installed Windows 8, Ubuntu, and Arch Linux, all running under the VirtualBox in our Mac OS operating system. So that's it for this episode. I hope it makes you excited to be able to explore many different operating systems all together in one machine, and that too in an open source software called VirtualBox. Now, before we end, I also wanted to give you a little bit about similar such software. So Parallels is also one of them. I believe it is paid. And then the other one is VMware. Also, it comes with a lot of other features as well. So if you want to kind of check out other virtualization software, I highly recommend you to check out these two. Finally, for the build link of the episode, it is 24ways.org. This is a fantastic website which is full of articles by very talented authors on web development and design. And guess what? In the month of December, there's actually each day throughout December that they will publish something on web design, all in the spirit of the Christmas cheer and the holidays. Right? So do check out 24ways.org. And finally, for all other episodes, do go to build-podcast.com, and you can subscribe through RSS, GitHub, YouTube, iTunes, Vimeo, and so much more. I would love to hear your feedback. Goodbye and see you next week.